The voices of men have fallen silent, their wisdom exhausted, their counsel scattered like dust in the wind. For days they argued, philosophers of pain, defenders of doctrine, physicians of words, and yet none could answer the question that burned beneath Job's ashes. Where is God when the innocent bleed? Now, the debates lie dead upon the earth. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar have withdrawn into uneasy silence. Even the young man, Elihu, the one who watched and listened, trembles as he steps forward, daring to speak what the elders would not. Great men are not always wise, he says, his eyes fixed on Job. The breath of the Almighty gives understanding. His words fall like sparks into the growing dark. God speaks, once, yes twice, yet man perceives it not. In a dream, in a whisper, in the suffering of the righteous, he hides his purpose. As he speaks, the wind begins to change. The air grows heavy. The clouds gather on the horizon, low, black, alive. Thunder stirs beyond the hills, and the earth itself seems to hold its breath. Job looks up. The light has changed. The ashes at his feet swirl, restless. A sound begins to rise, not the voice of man, but something older, deeper, stronger. And from the distance, the first flash of lightning splits the sky. The friends shield their eyes. Elihu falls silent. Job's heartbeat slows, for something greater than pain is approaching. The silence breaks. The wind roars. And out of the whirlwind, the voice speaks. This is no longer the counsel of men. This is the revelation of God. This is the voice from the whirlwind. The wind rose like a living thing. It tore across the plains, bending the blackened grass and lifting the ashes of Job's sorrow into the air. The ground shuddered beneath his feet. Dust spiraled upward, twisting into the heavens like smoke seeking a voice. The sky had turned the color of iron. Thunder rolled across the distance, not in violence, but in majesty, a sound too vast for words, too deep for music. The friends fell back, their cloaks whipping in the wind, their faces pressed low to the ground. Elihu's final sentence dissolved in the roar, his eyes wide with awe and terror. And Job stood alone. The air around him hummed, thick with power. The whirlwind formed before him, vast, luminous, alive. It did not move with chaos, but with precision, like a crown of light sculpted by unseen hands. The storm circled, its center hollow, its breath speaking without words. Then, from within the thunder, a voice. It was not the voice of wrath, nor the voice of comfort. It was the voice of existence itself, a sound that carried the weight of stars, the pulse of creation, the whisper of eternity. Who is this, it said, that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? The sentence struck the air like lightning splitting the sky. Job fell to his knees, trembling. His lips moved, but no sound came. The voice continued, calm, vast, terrifying. Gird up now your loins like a man, for I will question you, and you shall answer me. The wind thickened, circling Job like a living storm. Where were you, said the voice, when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who measured its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. The words fell like thunder, not to crush, but to awaken. Every question burned through the fog of human wisdom, each one unraveling the pride of reason and replacing it with wonder. Job lifted his head slightly, eyes wide in the blinding light. The storm moved around him in waves, flashes of creation unfolding in sound and vision. He saw oceans drawn back by invisible hands, mountains pushed up from the deep, stars flung into their places like embers from the breath of God. The voice spoke again, rising with the rhythm of the wind. Who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb, when I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band? I said, thus far shall you come, and no farther. and here shall your proud waves be stayed. Have you ever commanded the morning, or caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it? The heavens flashed as though creation itself remembered its birth. Job bowed lower, his hands pressed into the soil. The storm was not against him. It surrounded him, engulfing him, lifting him into revelation. The voice continued, "Have you entered into the springs of the sea? Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare, if you know all this." The questions poured like waves upon waves. Job trembled, not with terror, but with the beginning of understanding. The God he had sought in silence was no longer hidden. He was speaking from the center of creation itself. "Where is the way to the dwelling of light?" the voice asked. "And where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, that you may know the paths to its home? Surely you know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great." The thunder rolled. The wind circled faster. The storm's edges glowed with fire. Job's friends, crouched far behind, could only hear echoes, fragments of sound that broke the mind to heal the soul. But Job heard every word. The voice grew gentler, yet more terrible. "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the treasury of hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble? By what way is the light parted, or the east wind scattered upon the earth? Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain, or a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on a land where no man is, on the wilderness in which there is no human?" The vision filled the air. Rain fell where no man walked. Rivers flowed through deserts unseen by eyes. Every image whispered one truth. The universe did not exist for man to understand, but for God to sustain. The voice deepened. "Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the constellations in their season, or guide the bear with her cubs? Do you know the ordinances of heaven? Can you establish their rule on the earth?" The storm burst with light, galaxies unseen to mortal sight, spinning in silence, singing in their orbits. Job saw them, if only for a heartbeat, the song of stars he had once longed to hear. "Can you lift your voice to the clouds," said the voice, "that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightning, that they may go and say to you, 'Here we are'?" The storm seemed to answer its own question. Bolts of fire laced the sky, then vanished like thoughts obeying their maker. The wind dropped suddenly, leaving only the sound of rain whispering on stone. Job knelt in the center of it, drenched, trembling, undone. Then the voice spoke once more, quieter now, but closer, as though the whirlwind itself had drawn inward, folding into a presence that stood before him. "Does the hawk fly by your wisdom? Does the eagle mount up at your command? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth, or watch the deer in labor? Do you give the horse his strength? Do you clothe his neck with thunder? Does he paw the valley and rejoice in his might? He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. He swallows the ground with fierce pride. Is it by your command that he does so?" Every question unveiled wonder that human eyes had forgotten. The creation Job had once seen as ordinary now revealed its creator in every breath of it. "Behold Behemoth," said the voice, rising again. "He eats grass like an ox. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of my works. Can you draw him out with a hook? Can anyone subdue him?" Thunder cracked like a heartbeat across the plains. "Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down his tongue with a rope? Will he make a covenant with you? Will he beg for mercy? Will you play with him as with a bird?" The sky flared white as the voice declared, "On earth there is nothing his equal, a creature without fear. He looks down on all the proud. He is king over all that are proud." The whirlwind swelled once more, encircling Job in brilliance. But now the voice changed. The storm softened, its tone shifting from awe to intimacy. "Shall he who contends with the Almighty instruct him?" The question pierced like light through darkness. Job's mouth opened, but his voice failed him. "Answer me," said the voice. And Job whispered, barely breathing, "Behold, I am vile. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand upon my mouth. I have spoken once, but I will not answer again." The storm quieted to a murmur, wind circling the ruins like breath. But the voice did not leave. "Gird up now your loins like a man," it said again, "for I will question you, and you will answer me. Will you indeed annul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God's? Can you thunder with a voice like mine?" The words rolled through heaven and earth alike. Job felt the weight of them not as punishment, but as presence, the revelation that his suffering had never been isolation, but encounter. And as the thunder rolled away into distance, Job knelt, trembling, eyes full of tears and light. He had not received the answers he sought. He had received the one he sought. The storm began to fade. The rain grew softer. The clouds thinned, revealing a pale dawn breaking on the horizon. Job lowered his head, and for the first time since the ashes, peace entered his breath. The wind did not vanish. It gentled, circling him like a living breath, carrying the scent of wet earth and the cool of stones washed clean. The sky, still bruised with cloud, opened seams of pale light at the edges, and in that softening the voice drew nearer, not as thunder now, but as thought that becomes sound. "Adorn yourself with majesty and dignity," it asked. "Clothe yourself with glory and splendor. Pour out the overflowings of your anger. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them together in the dust. Then I will also acknowledge to you that your own right hand can save you." The questions did not accuse. They unmade the small universe in which Job had tried to hold God still long enough to be measured. Around him the plains exhaled. A hawk cut the gray air in a clean arc. Far off, rain beaded on the backs of grazing animals that had never known his name. The world was wider than his grief, yet not indifferent to it. He felt it now, not as a contradiction, but as a mystery capacious enough to carry him. "Behold Leviathan," the voice said once more, as if returning to a lesson the heart must learn slowly. "Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? His sneezings flash forth light. His eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. His heart is hard as stone. On earth there is not his like." Job saw it, not merely a beast, but the image of all that terrifies men, the darkness that cannot be domesticated by intellect or tethered by ritual. And he saw, with sudden clarity, that the God who spoke did not fear such things, nor explain them away, but held even the untamable within his hand. The realization passed through him like lightning seeking ground, and when it left a tenderness that felt like strength returning in a truer form. The whirlwind thinned, the light within it quieted, and silence arrived, the kind that is full rather than empty. Job lifted his head. All his words, once sharp and many, lay scattered like broken pottery at his knees. But something new rose where argument had been, and he let it rise without resisting. "I know," he said, voice rough with rain and awe, "that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, 'Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge?' Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. You said, 'Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will make it known to me.' I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself, and I repent in dust and ashes." The sentence did not flatten him. It lifted him. Repentance was not collapse. It was consent, the surrender of a map too small for the country he had entered. Tears warmed his face. Ash clung to his fingers, and he let it, as if to say he would not forget where he had met God. Behind him, the friends pressed their foreheads to the wet ground. Elihu hid his face, trembling with a joy he did not yet know how to name. The wind's last threads unwound and drifted away across the hills, and the quiet that followed carried the after-sound of glory, like the ringing left in a sanctuary when the choir has finished and only breath remains. Job breathed. In that breath, he discovered that nothing in the world had changed and everything had. The grave still held what they held. The house was still a ruin. His skin still stung and ached. But the empty center, where accusation had echoed and return had seemed impossible, was no longer empty. It was inhabited. Presence had taken the place of explanation. Wonder had taken the place of why. He bowed his head again, not to escape the world, but to re-enter it rightly. Then another voice, the same and yet turned toward different hearers, moved across the stillness. Firm, unambiguous, just. It addressed Eliphaz, and through him the others, naming them with a sorrow that felt like a surgeon's hand. Their courage failed beneath the weight of it, for in a few sentences God revealed the distance between speaking for him and speaking of him. Job did not smile. He did not relish vindication. His heart, freshly broken open to mystery, now opened also to mercy. When the Lord required them to go to Job, to bring offerings and ask him to pray, Job rose, slowly, stiffly, and met them halfway. He lifted his hands over the men who had wounded him with their certainties and asked for blessing on their heads. Something invisible shifted when he did. The air lightened. The ground seemed to right itself underfoot, and a path that had felt blocked for a long time ran clear. The clouds loosened into strands and began to move east. Sunlight returned by increments, touching the edges of stones, sharpening the shape of every small thing, the curve of a shard, the print of a bird where it had landed near his feet. Job watched the tiny evidences of care and felt a quiet laughter rise, the kind that does not dismiss sorrow, but knows it is not the final line. He knelt and pressed his palm into the wet earth as if touching a promise. He remembered the children he had named, the feasts he had blessed, the mornings he had consecrated with burnt offerings, the vows he had made to keep his eyes clean, his hands generous, his words steady. Nothing of that righteousness was wasted. It had not been a bargain to be paid back with prosperity. It had been love. And love, as he now knew more deeply than breath, was always answered. Even if the answer took the shape of a whirlwind before it took the shape of restoration. He stood. The sores on his skin stung under the sun's new warmth, but the pain no longer owned him. He washed, slowly, as a priest might wash before entering a sanctuary. Water ran gray, then clear. He wrapped himself in a clean garment someone had saved from the ruin, and the cloth felt like a future placed across his shoulders. The ruins did not accuse him as they had before. They waited. He understood, without hearing words, that the one who speaks from storms also speaks in seeds and seasons, and that some answers come in harvests rather than in sentences. His friends approached, chastened and uncertain. Eliphaz's eyes were red. Bildad held the offering with both hands as if it might shatter. Zophar could not quite meet his gaze. Job received them with the solemn kindness of a man who has learned that to be forgiven is also to forgive. He prayed, not eloquently, not with the rolling cadences he once used when blessing 1,000 tents, but with the simplicity of one who has seen. He asked that the God who questioned him in mercy would shepherd these men through their smaller storms, and that the zeal which wounded would be converted into care. When he finished, they wept. Relief, shame, gratitude, a love awkward and real. Word began to travel as it always does, along paths of kinship and rumor. A brother came, and a cousin after him, a friend who had stayed away out of fear, a neighbor who had kept his distance because grief felt contagious. They brought bread and oil and sat on the ground with him, not to explain this time, but to comfort. Each retelling of the story grew humbler. They pressed coins into his palm. They left rings and bracelets as if to say, "We cannot replace what was taken, but we can stand near while the future is made." He did not count any of it that day. He counted faces. He counted hands. By evening, The light went soft and amber. A new quiet settled, not the bleak hush of loss, but the hush that often follows vows. Job looked west and thought of the day when he will stand and see the one he has seen only through storm and silence. The thought did not lift him out of the world. It pressed him more fully into it. He found himself longing for work, for fields to mend, for animals to feed, for a table to set with bread kneaded by hands that had learned again how to hope. He slept that night without visions, without nightmares, as a child sleeps when a father's voice has soothed the house. At dawn, birds stitched the air with sound, and he discovered the ordinary as if for the first time. The way steam lifts from warm water on a cool morning, the way a strap creaks when tightened, the way a gate sighs on its crook. He thanked God for each small liturgy. He did not hurry. He had learned to receive time as gift rather than weapon. In the days that followed, strength returned by degrees. A friend brought a yoke, another seed, another a young animal with more spirit than sense. Job smiled at the creature's stubbornness and saw in it a parable. The world still has wildness in it, and wildness under God is not chaos but joy. He walked the boundaries of his land with steps still tender from illness, placing his palm against trees that had survived, speaking low to the soil as though to wake it. He was not naive. He knew that sorrow would visit again in some form, as it visits every house. But he also knew, with a knowledge that does not unlearn, that he would not meet it alone. Sometimes, in the heat of noon, he would pause and remember the questions, the ones that unraveled him and rebuilt him. He would close his eyes and taste again the salt of rain on his lips, hear the pulse of a voice that did not apologize for being God and did not apologize for loving man. He would say softly to himself, "No purpose can be thwarted," and the sentence would steady his hands. On other afternoons, a line would return like a friend, "I had heard of you, but now my eye sees you." He would look around at the ordinary world and feel it lift like a veil. The friends visited often, changed men. They listened more than they spoke. When they offered counsel now, it was shaped by the discipline of mercy. When they prayed, it was with the humility of those who know the difference between thinking of God and being addressed by Him. Elihu, still young, asked questions and did not rush to answer them. Job loved him for that. Sometimes they sat together at dusk and let silence do the work words cannot do, both of them smiling at the memory of thunder. And yet, one thing remained, unfinished, unhealed, holy in its ache. The empty rooms, the names spoken now as blessings into the wind, the feasts whose chairs would not be filled by the same faces again. Job did not pretend those wounds were gone. He learned instead to carry them as men carry relics, tenderly, gratefully, aware that sorrow, too, can be an altar when it knows its place. In prayer he left those names where he had always left them. But now he trusted that the one who keeps storehouses of snow and treasures of hail could keep, more surely, the lives entrusted to his heart. So the whirlwind ended, and with it the long argument, not with a syllogism, but with a seeing, not with an answer, but with a presence that renders some questions beautiful and others unnecessary. The ash heap remained for a while longer, a monument not to despair, but to the place where God turned his face. Grass would grow there again. Children's feet might run there again. Laughter would learn the road home. This chapter draws breath and does not yet close. There is still a table to set, a name to restore, a future to unfold under a sky no longer iron but blue. The voice has spoken. Now the world will hear what happens when a man who has seen God begins to live again. This was the whirlwind, and it did not destroy him. It remade him. If you have stood beneath that storm with Job, come further. The next dawn holds what the storm prepared, the unlooked-for kindness of God in the land of the living, the mending of what can be mended, the surprising music of restoration. Continue to the final chapter, the dawn of restoration.